In this video, I want to start talking about our final stats project. Now, if you look at the outline that I've posted for the next 3 weeks, I'm kind of looking at this until kind of May 1st, and then we will see what happens beyond that. But this project should take us these 3 weeks through that. So what this project is going to involve is I've posted this paper on Google Classroom that kind of goes through all of it, and we're going to be doing this over the next 3 weeks. So this first week is really just the first two here, and you'll notice it starts at 2 and 3, and the reason for that is the final part of this project will be a PowerPoint. If we are in school and everything's normal, become the beginning of May, maybe we'll do a presentation to the rest of the class. If not, we'll figure something else out here. So the number 2 will relate to what slide it is in your PowerPoint. So the first thing we're going to do this first week is we're going to find an article and then also state our H sub O and H sub A, and then we're going to set up kind of collecting a survey. So let me kind of talk about those two things first. So this paper first has all of the information that the whole project involves. We're not going to worry about that this week. We're only going to look at the first two, and actually I've shared a separate paper with you that looks like this. So what we want to start off today is we want to find an article, a newspaper, a magazine, internet, something that makes a claim about one population proportion or one population mean. Now, this should not be something like, you know, what's somebody's favorite fast food restaurants, and you get a lot of different answers, McDonald's, Wendy's. This should be something where you really only come down with a couple choices. And I will just say, as you're doing this, it is much easier to do a proportion than it is to do a mean. And the problem with the mean is you got lots of data that then you need to do a lot more calculations with. So I'm going to do an example here today to kind of show you how we're setting this up. And I'm going to do this with a population proportion, and then I'll explain why that makes it a little bit easier. So you want to find some population proportion that is a survey, a study, something that's reported online. It's in some sort of reputable place, not just some random stats.com that some guy just made up in his basement and just posted online. So you want to try to find something that's a little bit more reputable than that. So I'm going to give you an example here, and here is the link when it says what's the source. Here's the link of my source. So if I go to that, here is the website I got this from, MacRumors, and the stat that they have here is 83% of US teens own an iPhone. So then it goes down, and if you go in the article, it explains that this comes from an investment bank and their annual, and you can actually click on that link and see the more detailed article. All I'm curious for is that 83%. It goes on to talk about a lot more stuff, but the 83% of teens own an iPhone. So when I look at my stat, that's going to be my claim. My claim would be that this article claims that 83% of teens own an iPhone. So that's going to be my claim. Now, you can't use that claim. You need to find your own or whatever you want to find about information online. I will say that we are going to survey other students at Smithville. So you want something, it's best if you can find an article that's based on teens. If it's not based on teens, if it's just on adults or just on people, that's perfectly okay. And then we're going to collect data to kind of survey this. So that's your first step, is you want to find the claim. Now, on the paper that I've given you, you'll notice there are 2 claims. I want you to find 2 different sources, 2 different claims that you want to look at. Number 1 being your first choice, number 2 being your second choice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let everybody submit 2 choices, and I'm going to kind of look, and I don't want to try to not have too many people double up and do the exact same stats. So this claim 1, claim 2, I will try to go through and pick these out to try to figure them out, and I'll explain that as we keep going here. So the first thing you need to do, and this needs to be done by Tuesday, is you want to find some statistic. If you have questions I have on here, use feedback from me. If you have questions for me that you want to ask to try to figure that out, please email me. I will have office hours this week to try to figure out what your stat or statistic that you want to find. So that's step one. The second part of this paper is once you find your two claims, you found your two sources, if you scroll to the bottom, you want to state your H sub O and your H sub A, and we're going to do a hypothesis test. This should be related to your claim. So if in my example, it says 83% of teens own iPhones. I think that is too high. So when I go to write my H sub O and my H sub A, what I'm going to say is I think P is less than 83%. And then my H sub O would be P is greater than or equal to 0.83. One of the things we're going to do further down in this project, as you can see down here on step number 8, is we are going to perform a hypothesis test. And we're going to check our sample data versus this claim that we found. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to come up with your H sub O and your H sub A before we collect the data. What we don't want to do is collect our data, then look at our data and say, oh, I think P is less than 0.83 or I think P is greater than. So I want this to be written down and documented here before we collect our data. So that is the first step. So that is what is due on Tuesday. You need to find your two claims and then find your H sub O and your H sub A for these two claims. The third part of this then for this week is you want to find the final project questions for the survey. So we're going to do a survey through Google Forms. I'm going to send it out to all of my classes, not just statistics, so we get lots of good data. And so what I want you to do is to come up with a question that is related to what you're testing. So in my case, my question would be, do you own an iPhone? Yes or no? Because that's what relates to that survey, okay? And once we have that questions, I'm going to take all of these questions, I'm going to put them in Google Forms, we'll send out a link and everybody can go through and take that survey. So as you look at what the weekly thing is, this question is due by Thursday. Okay, so that question is due by Thursday. And then on Friday, I will start editing these questions to try to combine them into a Google form for a survey that will be taken on Monday. So I have a couple days for us to have you turn in these questions, to ask me questions, for me to provide feedback for you. Remember, you don't want to have biased questions. You're only asking one question to everybody. You're not trying to influence people. You want it to be as unbiased as possible. Do you own an iPhone? Yes or no? Then we'll be able to take that information and be able to do confidence intervals and all this information to test this claim that we found online. So that gets us started this first week. You want to research some ideas for your final project. These stats, look online, see what you can find online. You want to turn in this form where you list your two claims, the sources for them, and then your H sub O and your H sub A. That is due on Tuesday. And then by Thursday, there will be a link on a Google Classroom for you to submit your two questions that you want to include on the survey. And then pay attention for some emails or some messages through Google Classroom from me back and forth to you, just so we can make sure we get these that sound right, they sound correct. So when we put them on the survey and we can collect all that data on Monday and Tuesday of next week, that we're able to use that to finish out our final project. If you have questions, please email me. I will be having office hours this week also online. If you have questions on as we get started on this final project that's going to take us the next 3 weeks.